At 11:48 p.m., Claire Bennett Callahan was bleeding somewhere inside her body while her husband watched her name flash across his iPhone. Wife. Nathaniel Callahan stared at the screen. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then he turned the phone face down. Across Manhattan, Claire lay beneath thin hospital blankets at New York Presbyterian, her skin pale beneath the white lights. Less than 12 hours earlier, surgeons had removed part of her liver. Nobody outside the family knew why. Claire was 42, a former ICU nurse who had spent years calming terrified families beside hospital beds. She knew what falling blood pressure meant. She knew why nurses suddenly stopped making small talk. And she knew why Dr. Rebecca Sloan kept checking the monitor before looking at her. Claire, we're concerned about internal bleeding. Claire swallowed. How concerned? Rebecca did not lie. Enough that we're preparing for another procedure. Claire closed her eyes. Through the glass wall, Manhattan glittered beyond the hospital windows. Somewhere below, yellow taxis moved through the streets. Somewhere across the city, Nathaniel was supposed to be waiting for news. He had promised, "I'll be there when you wake up." Claire reached toward the bedside table. "My phone." The nurse hesitated. "Are you sure?" "My husband needs to know." She called. 27 blocks away, Nathaniel sat inside Vanessa Whitmore's luxury apartment near Fifth Avenue. His Rolex rested beside 2 champagne glasses. Vanessa stood barefoot near the window, wrapped in a cream cashmere robe. Her eyes were red. "They followed my Mercedes again," she whispered. Nathaniel looked at the photographs on her phone. A dark sedan, a blurred man, a message containing 5 words. "You should watch your back." Then Claire called. Vanessa noticed the screen. "Aren't you going to answer?" Nathaniel exhaled. "Claire's in the hospital." "That sounds like a reason to answer. She has doctors around her." He declined the call. Back at the hospital, Claire watched the screen go dark. She said nothing. At 12:16 a.m., her blood pressure dropped again. She called a second time. Nathaniel declined again. This time Vanessa touched his arm. "Maybe something happened." Nathaniel shook his head. "The surgery was successful. She's safe." At 12:41 a.m., Dr. Sloan entered with 2 nurses. "We need to move now." Claire looked toward her phone. 1 minute. She called Nathaniel for the 3rd time. No answer. Claire listened to his voicemail greeting. Then she spoke quietly. "Nate, I know you're busy." Her voice trembled. She hated that. "I just wanted to hear your voice." She stopped. There were so many things she could have said. That she was scared. That she might need another operation. That she suddenly understood why patients reached for people they loved when machines began beeping faster. Instead, Claire whispered, "Good night." She ended the call. A nurse began removing the jewelry from Claire's swollen hand. Her wedding ring would not slide easily. When it finally came free, the nurse held it carefully. "I can place this in hospital security." Claire stared at the ring Nathaniel had put on her finger 11 years earlier. "No. Would you like me to put it with your belongings?" Claire looked toward the empty chair beside her bed. "Yes." The nurse placed it inside the bedside drawer. As they wheeled Claire toward the procedure room, Rebecca leaned closer. "Is there anyone else you want us to call?" Claire looked through the glass toward another recovery room. Inside lay Margaret Callahan, Nathaniel's 69-year-old mother, alive because of the liver tissue Claire had given her that morning. Claire shook her head. "Don't wake Margaret. She needs to heal." The doors opened. Claire disappeared behind them. Across Manhattan, Nathaniel poured himself another drink. His iPhone remained face down beside his Rolex. By sunrise, he would finally come looking for his wife. But room 814 would already be empty. 11 years before Claire Bennett Callahan left her wedding ring inside a hospital drawer, she had met Nathaniel Callahan in the least glamorous place imaginable. A hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning. Claire was 31 then, working overnight shifts in the intensive care unit at New York Presbyterian. Nathaniel had arrived after one of his employees suffered a serious warehouse accident. He wore an expensive charcoal coat, but he looked exhausted. Claire remembered that more than the watch on his wrist or the black Mercedes waiting outside. He had stayed beside the injured man's wife for almost 6 hours. That mattered to her. Nathaniel remembered something different. Claire had finished a 12-hour shift, bought a coffee she barely touched, then sat with a frightened stranger because the woman had no family in New York. Nathaniel had never met anyone quite like her. He asked her to dinner 3 days later. Claire refused twice. The 3rd time, she agreed. Back then, Nathaniel was still building the legitimate side of Callahan Atlantic Holdings. He had money, but not the polished empire people would later associate with his name. Claire saw the man before she saw the power. She helped him organize employee medical benefits when he realized most of his warehouse workers had terrible coverage. She explained hospital billing statements he did not understand. She reviewed insurance options on her old MacBook late at night while Nathaniel worked across the kitchen table. When they married, Nathaniel told her she had made his life feel human. For years, Claire believed him. Then success became bigger. The Park Avenue office came. The Mercedes S-Class came. The charity dinners came. So did the Rolex upgrades, the private dining rooms, and the invitations to places Claire once saw only in magazines. Nathaniel changed slowly enough that Claire kept finding explanations. He missed dinner because of a board meeting. He missed their anniversary because investors had flown in from London. He arrived late to Margaret's birthday because a shipping contract had collapsed. Claire learned to say, "It's okay." That sentence became dangerous, because Nathaniel began believing it. The first time Claire met Vanessa Whitmore, she understood immediately why people noticed her. Vanessa was 34, polished, confident, and perfectly suited to the world Nathaniel now inhabited. She worked as a luxury brand consultant and had recently been hired to help reorganize fundraising events for the Callahan Family Foundation. At their first meeting, Vanessa wore a cream Dior suit and spoke confidently about donor psychology, corporate partnerships, and high-net-worth networking. Claire liked her. That was what hurt later. Vanessa asked intelligent questions. She remembered names. She knew how to make powerful people feel important. Within months, Nathaniel began mentioning her often. Vanessa thinks we should move the benefit dinner to the plaza. Vanessa says the younger donors want something more modern. Vanessa knows someone at Cartier who can sponsor the auction. Claire listened. She noticed. But she did not accuse. Then Margaret Callahan became sick. At 69, Nathaniel's mother had always seemed indestructible. She had survived widowhood, family disputes, business investigations, and decades of men underestimating her. But advanced liver disease did what powerful enemies never had. It made Margaret weak. The family consulted specialists. Medication helped only temporarily. Eventually, Dr. Rebecca Sloan explained that Margaret needed a transplant. Nathaniel immediately asked how much money it would take. Rebecca looked directly at him. This is not something money can solve on demand. Testing began. Nathaniel was disqualified as a donor because of a medical issue discovered during evaluation. His younger brother Andrew was not compatible enough. Other relatives were ruled out. Margaret's condition continued deteriorating. Claire watched her mother-in-law become smaller every week. One afternoon, after Nathaniel left for a meeting, Claire remained behind. She sat across from Rebecca and asked quietly, "Can spouses be tested?" Rebecca studied her. "Yes, I want to do it." Margaret found out 3 days later. She was furious. "Absolutely not." Claire sat beside her bed. "You need a liver, and you are my son's wife. I'm also a nurse. I understand the risks." Margaret's eyes filled. "What if something happens to you?" Claire reached for her hand. "What if something happens to you because nobody tried?" Margaret looked away. Claire continued gently. "You gave me a family after my parents were gone. Let me give you more time with yours." Margaret cried then. Not loudly. Just 2 tears slipping down the face of a woman who hated being seen as vulnerable. The testing confirmed Claire was an acceptable living donor candidate. Rebecca made sure Claire understood everything. Pain, recovery, possible complications, the possibility that the surgery could go wrong. Claire signed the consent forms anyway. Nathaniel knew. He kissed her forehead the night before surgery and promised, "I'll be there when you wake up." Claire smiled. "Take care of your mother first." Nathaniel answered without hesitation, "I can take care of both of you." Claire believed him. The next morning, nurses prepared both women for surgery. Margaret reached for Claire's hand before they were separated. "If I wake up and you don't—" Claire stopped her. "You're going to wake up. So are you." Claire smiled. "That's the plan." Hours later, Margaret opened her eyes. The transplant had worked. Her first question was about Claire. The nurse told her Claire was recovering. Margaret closed her eyes in relief. But in another room, Claire slowly woke beneath white hospital lights. Her abdomen burned. Her throat was dry. She turned her head toward the chair Nathaniel had promised to occupy. It was empty. Claire stared at it for several seconds. Then she told herself what she had told herself for years. He probably had a good reason. What Claire did not know was that Nathaniel already had somewhere else he wanted to be, and before midnight she would discover exactly how little one promise could mean. At 11:57 p.m., Nathaniel Callahan was still sitting in Vanessa Whitmore's apartment when his younger brother called. Andrew Callahan rarely called after midnight, unless something was wrong. Nathaniel glanced at the screen. Vanessa was standing near the windows, arms wrapped around herself as Manhattan glittered below. "Answer it," she said softly. Nathaniel picked up. "What?" Andrew did not waste time. "Why aren't you at the hospital?" Nathaniel leaned back against the sofa. "Because Mom's stable and Claire's surgery went well." "That isn't what I asked." Nathaniel's expression hardened. Vanessa watched him carefully. Andrew continued. "I just spoke to one of Mom's nurses. Claire had complications." Nathaniel sat forward. "What complications?" "I don't know. They wouldn't tell me anything." Nathaniel looked at his phone. Claire's first missed call still appeared near the top of the screen. Then he looked toward Vanessa. Her eyes were red. The anonymous message still glowed on the coffee table beside her. "You should watch your back." Nathaniel stood. "I'll call the hospital." Andrew's voice sharpened. "You should be there." Nathaniel hated being told what to do, especially by his brother. "I said I'll handle it." "Have you even spoken to Claire?" Silence. Andrew understood immediately. "Nate." Nathaniel walked toward the window. "She's surrounded by doctors." "That doesn't mean she doesn't need her husband. Vanessa may actually be in danger." Andrew went quiet. "Then, and Claire isn't?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "The surgery was successful. You don't know that everything after surgery is successful." Nathaniel looked at the dark glass, seeing his reflection. Black shirt, expensive watch, tired eyes. A man who was used to making decisions quickly and expecting everyone around him to trust those decisions. He said the words that would later follow him everywhere. "She's in a hospital. She's safe." Andrew exhaled slowly. "You better be right." The call ended. Across the city, Claire was not safe. Her blood pressure had fallen again. Dr. Rebecca Sloan stood beside the bed reviewing imaging results on an iPad while two nurses prepared medication. Claire watched their faces. Years of ICU work had taught her that medical staff could say almost anything calmly. Their eyes usually told the truth first. Rebecca finally lowered the iPad. "We're seeing bleeding near the surgical site." Claire swallowed. "How bad?" "We're still assessing it. But I don't want to wait if your pressure continues dropping." Claire looked toward the monitor. She understood every number. Sometimes knowledge made fear worse. "Will I need surgery again?" "Possibly." Claire closed her eyes. For the first time that night, tears gathered beneath her lashes. Not because of the pain, because she suddenly wanted Nathaniel. Not the CEO. Not the man whose name made boardrooms quiet. Not the man who could have a Mercedes waiting downstairs within 3 minutes. She wanted the man from 11 years earlier who had once sat beside an injured employee's wife until dawn because she was afraid. That man would have answered. Claire reached for her iPhone. Second call. Nathaniel saw her name. Vanessa saw it too. This time she said nothing. Nathaniel stared at the screen longer. His thumb moved toward the answer button. Then Vanessa's phone buzzed. She gasped. Another message. A photograph of the entrance to her building. Vanessa covered her mouth. "They know where I live." Nathaniel declined Claire's call. He immediately contacted Daniel Mercer, head of Callahan Security. "I want 2 men downstairs now." Daniel sounded sleepy, but alert. "Any confirmed threat?" "I'm sending you screenshots. Send the original messages too." Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Nathaniel did not notice. Back at the hospital, Claire stared at the words, "call" ended. A nurse named Emily adjusted her IV. "Would you like me to call someone else?" Claire shook her head. "My husband knows I'm here." Emily looked at the empty chair beside the bed but said nothing. At 12:41 a.m., Rebecca returned. "We need to move." Claire's pulse climbed. The room suddenly filled with activity. A blood pressure cuff tightened around her arm. A nurse disconnected one monitor and attached another for transport. Claire whispered, "My phone." Emily placed it in her hand. Claire called Nathaniel one final time. It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Voicemail. Claire closed her eyes. "Nate. I know you're busy." Her voice shook. She hated that he would hear her afraid. "I just wanted to hear your voice." She almost told him everything. That she might be taken back into surgery. that her abdomen felt like it was tearing open, that every instinct she had as a nurse was telling her this was serious. Instead, she whispered, "Good night." She ended the call. Emily reached for Claire's swollen left hand. "We need to remove your jewelry." The wedding ring resisted. Soap finally helped slide it free. Emily held it up. "Would you like me to send this to security?" Claire stared at the gold band. 11 years. Thousands of dinners. Arguments. Funerals. Christmas mornings. Promises. Forgiveness. Waiting. No. Emily waited. Claire looked toward the empty chair. "Put it in the drawer." The ring disappeared inside the bedside cabinet. As the nurses wheeled Claire into the hallway, Rebecca walked beside her. "Is there anyone else you want contacted?" Claire turned her head toward another recovery room. Margaret was sleeping peacefully inside, the woman carrying part of Claire's liver. Claire whispered, "Don't wake her." Rebecca frowned. She would want to know. She needs to heal. The elevator doors opened. Claire was pushed inside. Across Manhattan, Nathaniel's phone remained beside his Rolex. Vanessa poured another glass of water with trembling hands. Nathaniel looked once toward the screen. No new call. He told himself that meant everything was fine. By the time Nathaniel finally heard Claire's voicemail, the woman who had always waited for him would already have made one decision he could not control. At 6:32 the next morning, Nathaniel Callahan finally listened to Claire's voicemail. He was sitting in the back seat of his Mercedes S-Class while Manhattan woke beneath a gray winter sky. His driver had just turned onto Madison Avenue when Nathaniel noticed the notification again. One new voicemail. He pressed play. Claire's voice filled the car. "Nate, I know you're busy." Nathaniel's expression changed immediately. Her voice sounded weak. Not angry. Not accusing. Afraid. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Then silence. Then, "Good night." Nathaniel sat completely still. The city moved outside the window. Delivery trucks. Yellow taxis. People carrying Starbucks cups toward office buildings. For several seconds, Nathaniel heard nothing except the faint hum of the car. Then he said, "Turn around." The driver glanced at him in the mirror. "Sir?" "The hospital. Now." Nathaniel called Claire. No answer. Again. Nothing. He called the nursing station. A receptionist asked for identification and told him she could not discuss a patient's status over the phone. Nathaniel's frustration rose instantly. "This is Nathaniel Callahan. I'm her husband." "I understand, sir." "Then tell me where my wife is." "I'm sorry. You need to speak with the care team directly." Nathaniel ended the call. He looked at Claire's voicemail again. 3 missed calls from her. 5 from Andrew. 2 from the hospital. For the first time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Claire had not called once because she was lonely. She had called repeatedly because something was wrong. Nathaniel leaned forward. Faster. By 6:51 a.m., the Mercedes stopped outside the hospital entrance. Nathaniel stepped out before the driver opened his door. Inside the lobby, he bought coffee without thinking. Claire always wanted coffee after long hospital nights. Then he saw the flowers. White roses. He bought those too. It was absurd. Coffee and flowers for a woman who had spent the night fighting complications from major surgery. But Nathaniel still believed this could be repaired with presents. An apology. An explanation. He took the elevator to the 8th floor. Room 814. He walked quickly, then stopped. The door was open. The bed was empty. Fresh white sheets covered the mattress. No Claire. No overnight bag. No shoes beneath the chair. No blue cardigan hanging from the hook. Nothing. Nathaniel looked at the room number. 814. He looked again. Correct. He stepped inside. Claire? No answer. The coffee slipped slightly in his hand. He placed everything on the windowsill and opened the bathroom door. Empty. He turned toward the nurse's station. Where is my wife? Several people looked up. A nurse recognized him. Mr. Callahan. Claire Callahan. Room 814. Please lower your voice. Nathaniel moved closer. She had surgery yesterday. Where is she? The nurse stood. I'll contact Dr. Sloan. Nathaniel's chest tightened. Why do you need the doctor? No answer. That silence terrified him more than any explanation. He returned to the room. That was when he noticed the bedside drawer. Half open. Inside was a clear hospital property bag. Nathaniel reached in. Claire's wedding ring rested inside. He stopped breathing. For 11 years, he had seen that ring on her hand almost every day. Now it lay alone in a plastic bag. Nathaniel picked it up carefully. His fingers began to shake. A terrible thought entered his mind. He turned toward the hallway. Where is she? This time his voice cracked. Dr. Rebecca Sloan appeared at the end of the corridor. Nathaniel walked toward her. What happened? Rebecca studied him. She had spent the night watching Claire struggle while the chair beside her bed remained empty. Her expression was professional, but cold. Your wife survived the night. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Relief hit him so hard he nearly lost balance. He opened them again. Where is she? She developed post-operative bleeding. We stabilized her. Where? She requested a transfer early this morning. Nathaniel stared at her. A transfer? Yes. To where? Rebecca did not answer immediately. Nathaniel stepped closer. I'm her husband. I know. Then tell me where she went. She specifically requested that her location not be shared with you. Nathaniel looked as if he had misunderstood the language. That's not possible. Rebecca's face remained calm. It is. She just had surgery. She is medically stable for supervised transfer. I want the address. I cannot give it to you. Nathaniel's voice dropped. Do you know who I am? Rebecca looked directly at him. Yes. Then, and in this hospital you are a husband whose wife asked for privacy. Nathaniel had spent years opening doors with his name. Boardrooms, private clubs, political offices, bank meetings, restaurants, with 6-month waiting lists. But this door remained closed. He looked down at Claire's wedding ring. Then he heard wheels behind him. A wheelchair rolled slowly into the corridor. Margaret Callahan sat beneath a hospital blanket, pale, weak, alive. Her eyes moved from Nathaniel's face to the ring in his hand. Something changed in her expression. She understood immediately. Nathaniel looked at his mother. Mom. Margaret raised one trembling hand. Don't. Her voice was weak but sharp. She looked toward room 814, then back at her son. Where is Claire? Nathaniel could not answer. Margaret's eyes narrowed. She called you last night. Nathaniel froze. Margaret had heard more than he realized. How many times? His throat tightened. Mom, Vanessa was in danger. Margaret stared at him, not confused, not shocked, disappointed, deeply disappointed. Then she asked the question Nathaniel would remember for the rest of his life. Where were you when the woman who saved my life was begging for her husband? Margaret Callahan did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The disappointment in her face was worse than anger. Nathaniel stood in the hospital corridor with Claire's wedding ring pressed into his palm while his mother stared at him from the wheelchair. Where were you? Margaret asked again. Nathaniel looked toward Dr. Rebecca Sloan, then back at his mother. Vanessa received threats. Margaret's expression did not change. What kind of threats? Messages. Someone followed her car. And that required you to stay with her all night? Nathaniel hesitated. That hesitation answered more than words could. Margaret slowly looked away. Rebecca remained silent, but Nathaniel could feel judgment in the corridor. He hated it. He was Nathaniel Callahan. Men twice his age became careful around him. Executives changed their tone when he entered a boardroom. Competitors knew exactly what his family name meant. Yet standing beside his mother's wheelchair, none of that mattered. Margaret looked at Rebecca. How bad was Claire? Rebecca answered carefully. She developed significant post-operative bleeding. Her blood pressure dropped several times. We were concerned enough to prepare for urgent intervention. Margaret's fingers tightened around the blanket covering her legs. Was she awake? Yes. Was she afraid? Rebecca paused. Nathaniel looked up. That pause frightened him. She remained calm, Rebecca said. But calm and unafraid are not the same thing. Margaret closed her eyes. Nathaniel remembered Claire's voicemail. I just wanted to hear your voice. His stomach turned. Margaret opened her eyes again. How many times did she call him? Rebecca looked at Nathaniel. He wished she would not answer. 3. Margaret stared at her son. 3? Nathaniel's voice dropped. I saw the calls. The words were barely audible. Margaret's face changed. You saw them? Yes. And you declined them? Nathaniel looked down. Mom, I thought she was stable. Margaret suddenly pushed the blanket aside as if she wanted to stand. A nurse immediately moved toward her. Rebecca placed a hand on Margaret's shoulder. You need to remain seated. Margaret ignored them. Her eyes never left Nathaniel. You thought? Nathaniel said nothing. You thought because she didn't scream? She didn't need you? She never told me it was serious. Margaret laughed once. There was no humor in it. She shouldn't have had to. The hallway became completely still. Margaret pointed toward the empty hospital room. That woman spent months preparing to cut open her body for me. Nathaniel swallowed. She went through medical testing alone because she didn't want us worrying. Her voice began to break. She sat beside my bed when I told her I would rather die than let her take the risk. Nathaniel had never heard that part. Margaret continued. She convinced me to accept because she said I deserved more time with my sons. Tears appeared in her eyes. Nathaniel looked away. Mom. No. Margaret's voice sharpened. You will look at me. He did. She pressed one hand over the surgical dressing beneath her hospital gown. She gave me part of her body. Nathaniel's breathing changed. Margaret pointed at him. You couldn't give her one night. The words landed harder than any threat Nathaniel had ever received. He looked at the ring in his palm. Suddenly it felt impossibly heavy. Rebecca spoke quietly. Claire repeatedly asked about Margaret during the night. Nathaniel looked at her. What? Even while we were treating her complication. Rebecca's voice remained calm. She wanted to know whether your mother was stable. Margaret began crying. Not loudly. Her shoulders simply folded inward. Nathaniel moved toward her. Mom. Margaret raised a hand to stop him. Did Claire ask for me? Rebecca nodded. She asked us not to wake you. Margaret covered her mouth. Nathaniel felt something inside him collapse. Claire had been bleeding. Claire had been afraid. And somehow, she had still been protecting his mother. While he had been sitting beside Vanessa, he pulled out his iPhone and called Claire. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. He typed, Claire, please call me. Then, I'm at the hospital. Then, I need to explain. He stared at the screen. No response. Nathaniel turned to Rebecca. You said she transferred. Someone had to arrange it. Rebecca said nothing. I can pay for whatever facility she's in. Margaret looked up sharply. Listen to yourself. Nathaniel stopped. You think this is about money? I'm trying to find my wife. No. You're trying to regain control. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Margaret leaned back into the wheelchair. If Claire wanted you to know where she was, you would know. Nathaniel looked toward the elevator. I have people who can find her. Margaret's eyes became cold. Do not send men after her. She's recovering from surgery, and she is still allowed to say no to you. That sentence stopped him. For years, Nathaniel had believed protecting someone meant deciding what was best for them. Margaret was forcing him to understand something different. Respect sometimes meant staying away. Across the city, Claire lay in the back of a private medical transport vehicle heading north out of Manhattan. Her sister, Laura Bennett, sat beside her holding a paper cup of coffee neither woman had touched. Claire's face was pale. Her movements were careful. Her iPhone rested, powered off inside her bag. Laura looked at her. Are you sure? Claire stared through the window as Manhattan disappeared behind them. No. Laura squeezed her hand. Claire took a slow breath. But I know I can't wake up in that room and start making excuses for him again. Back at the hospital, Nathaniel closed his hand around Claire's ring. For the first time in 11 years, he had no idea where his wife was. And for the first time, Claire was not waiting for him to find the answer. When Nathaniel returned home that afternoon, he would discover that Claire had left behind almost everything he had ever bought her and taken only the pieces of her life that existed before him. Nathaniel returned to the Park Avenue penthouse shortly after 3 that afternoon. For the first time in years, the apartment felt too large. The elevator doors opened directly into the foyer, where polished marble reflected the gray Manhattan light. A Tiffany bowl sat on the console table. Claire had once filled it with fresh flowers every Monday. Today it was empty. Nathaniel removed his coat and called her name before he could stop himself. Claire? Nothing answered. He stood still. The silence felt different now. Not peaceful, abandoned. He walked toward their bedroom. Claire's side of the closet door was open. Nathaniel expected emptiness. Instead, almost everything was still there. Her dark Dior dresses, 2 cashmere coats, the Cartier necklace he had given her on their 10th anniversary, a Tiffany bracelet she had worn exactly once. 3 expensive handbags still rested carefully on the upper shelf. Nathaniel stared at them. He had bought those things because he thought they proved he loved her. Claire had left everyone behind. Then he noticed what was missing. The old navy sweater she wore on Sunday mornings, her comfortable jeans, running shoes, a worn leather overnight bag she had owned before they met. Nathaniel opened the dresser. One drawer was nearly empty. Claire's ordinary clothes were gone. The expensive ones remained. That hurt more than if she had taken everything. He crossed the room and opened the small wooden box where Claire kept sentimental items. The box was gone. Inside it had been her father's Timex watch, her mother's handwritten recipes, old photographs from Pennsylvania, letters Claire had kept since college. Nathaniel suddenly understood. She had not packed for a vacation. She had taken the parts of herself that had existed before she became Claire Callahan. He walked into her home office. The desk looked unusually bare. Her MacBook was missing. So was her Kindle. The framed photograph of Claire with her parents was gone, but stacks of paperwork remained. Nathaniel sat down. On top was a handwritten schedule. Margaret post-transplant care, medication times, blood work appointments, diet instructions, emergency numbers, transportation arrangement, a note to remind the housekeeper that Margaret hated taking pills on an empty stomach. Nathaniel stared at Claire's handwriting. She had prepared all of this before undergoing surgery herself. Even while planning to have part of her liver removed, Claire had been thinking about his mother. A second folder contained employee healthcare cases, a warehouse worker recovering from back surgery, a driver's wife waiting for breast cancer treatment, an accountant whose son needed specialized physical therapy. Claire had written notes beside every name. Call insurance Monday. Check medication assistance. Ask Dr. Patel about earlier appointment. Nathaniel leaned back. He had never seen most of these files. He knew Claire helped with the foundation. He had assumed that meant meetings, charity dinners, and signatures. He had never asked what she actually did. On the floor beside the desk sat an unopened Amazon box. Nathaniel cut through the tape. Inside was a pair of white nursing shoes. Simple, practical, nothing like the designer heels in her closet. There was also a small notebook. On the first page, Claire had written, "Return to work goals." Nathaniel stopped. She had been planning to go back. Below it were notes. Renew nursing certification. Contact hospital education department. Community health hours. Explore patient navigation program. Nathaniel read the list twice. Claire had been imagining a future, and somehow he had known nothing about it. He picked up his phone and almost called her again. Then Margaret's words returned. "You're trying to regain control." He put the phone down. For several minutes, Nathaniel sat alone at Claire's desk. Then something inside him finally broke. He lowered his head into his hands. There was no rage, no shouting, no broken glass. Only a man sitting in a beautiful apartment surrounded by expensive things his wife had never needed. Tears came quietly. Nathaniel had not cried when his father died. He had not cried during federal investigations, business losses, or family funerals. But now he stared at a pair of nursing shoes and could barely breathe. Because they told him something no accusation could. Claire had been building a life beyond him long before she left. Not because she planned betrayal, because some part of her already knew she had disappeared inside their marriage. More than 100 miles away, Claire woke in a private rehabilitation facility near the Pennsylvania border. Laura Bennett sat beside the window, reading on a Kindle. When Claire moved, pain crossed her face. Laura immediately stood. "Do you need the nurse?" Claire shook her head. "Just water." Laura handed her a cup. Claire drank slowly. Then she asked, "Did Nate call you?" Laura hesitated. 7 times. Claire closed her eyes. "Did you answer?" "No." A small smile appeared on Claire's face. "Thank you." Laura sat beside her. After a moment she asked, "Do you want him back?" Claire stared at the hospital blanket. "I don't know." Laura waited. Then she asked something different. "Do you want your old life back?" Claire answered immediately, "No." The certainty surprised both women. Claire looked toward the window. For the first time, leaving did not feel like punishment. It felt like survival. Back in Manhattan, Nathaniel's phone vibrated. A message from Vanessa. "I'm scared again. Can you come over?" Nathaniel stared at it. Hours earlier, he would have stood immediately. Now he looked at Claire's empty chair, the nursing shoes, and the life he had failed to notice. Then he typed one sentence. "Send me every original message you received." Vanessa responded almost immediately. "Why?" Nathaniel's expression hardened. Because something about last night no longer made sense. And before the evening ended, Nathaniel would discover that Vanessa had not been nearly as helpless as she wanted him to believe. By 6 that evening, Nathaniel had stopped thinking like a husband. He started thinking like the man who had built his life around control. Vanessa had sent him 3 screenshots, 2 photographs, and a voice message she claimed proved someone had been following her for days. Nathaniel forwarded everything to Daniel Mercer. Daniel had spent 23 years with the NYPD before becoming head of security for Callahan Atlantic. He had the kind of face that never revealed whether he believed you. At 7:10 p.m., Daniel entered Nathaniel's Park Avenue office, carrying an iPad and a thin folder. Nathaniel looked up immediately. Well, Daniel did not sit. The story has problems. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. What kind? Daniel placed the iPad on the desk. The sedan, Vanessa said, followed her. Yesterday was a hired car. Nathaniel stared at the screen. Daniel opened a second image. License plate. Reservation record. Pickup time. The driver was booked through a private transportation service under the name of one of Vanessa's assistants. Nathaniel said nothing. Daniel continued. The photograph of the man outside her building was taken 3 days ago. She said it was last night. I know. Nathaniel's face hardened. What about the messages? One appears genuine. And the others? Daniel paused. They were sent from an account created yesterday afternoon. Nathaniel leaned back. Can you trace it? Not conclusively yet. But? Daniel looked directly at him. But the account was accessed from a device connected to the Wi-Fi network inside Vanessa's building. For several seconds, Nathaniel did not move. The office around him suddenly seemed too quiet. The Manhattan skyline glowed beyond the glass. A stock ticker moved silently across the television on the far wall. Nathaniel looked down at Claire's wedding ring, which he had placed beside his Mont Blanc pen. 3 calls. 3 times. He had chosen Vanessa. And now, the emergency that kept him there might never have existed. Nathaniel stood. Get the car. Daniel did not move. Nate. Nathaniel looked at him. What? Whatever she did, don't turn this into an excuse. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Daniel continued carefully. You ignored Claire's calls before you knew whether any threat was real. The words landed harder than Nathaniel expected. Daniel picked up the folder. I'm telling you because if you walk into Vanessa's apartment blaming her for everything, you're going to miss the part that belongs to you. Nathaniel looked away. Then he said, Get the car. 20 minutes later, his Mercedes stopped outside Vanessa's building near 5th Avenue. She opened the door wearing a soft gray sweater. Her expression changed when she saw his face. Nate? He walked past her. Vanessa closed the door slowly. What happened? Nathaniel turned. The Sedan. She froze. What about it? It was hired. Vanessa's eyes moved away. Nathaniel continued. The photograph of the man outside your building was 3 days old. I can explain. And 2 of the messages came from an account created yesterday. Vanessa folded her arms. Nathaniel took 1 step closer. Why? Her face hardened. You already decided I'm lying. Why? Vanessa remained silent. Nathaniel's voice dropped. Claire was taken back for emergency treatment last night. Vanessa looked at him. Something like guilt crossed her face, then disappeared. I didn't know that. She called me 3 times. I know. Nathaniel stared at her. You knew? Vanessa swallowed. I saw the phone. The room went still. Nathaniel felt cold. You knew she was calling from the hospital. Yes. And you let me believe you were being hunted. Vanessa's eyes filled. I was scared. Of what? Of losing you. Nathaniel almost laughed. The sound that came out had no humor in it. Vanessa stepped toward him. You told me things were over between you and Claire. I told you my marriage was complicated. You told me she didn't understand your life anymore. Nathaniel said nothing. Vanessa continued. You were always going back to her. Every time Margaret got sick, every time Claire needed something, every family dinner, every crisis, I was always the one waiting. Nathaniel stared at her. So you created one. Vanessa's shoulders dropped. I exaggerated. You fabricated evidence. I wanted you to stay. You knew my wife was in surgery. I knew she was recovering. Nathaniel's eyes flashed. She was bleeding. Vanessa looked shaken. I didn't know. Nathaniel turned away. He pressed both hands against the kitchen counter. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass. For the first time, he felt something worse than anger. Disgust. Not only at Vanessa, at himself. Vanessa spoke behind him. You're acting like I dragged you here. Nathaniel turned. She wiped tears from her face. You saw her name on your phone. He said nothing. 3 times. Nathaniel's breathing slowed. Vanessa's voice became sharper. I didn't touch your hand. I didn't decline those calls. He stared at her. You chose to stay. Silence. There it was. The truth he did not want. Vanessa had manipulated him, but she had not made the decision for him. Nathaniel looked down. 3 calls, 3 chances. He had made the same choice every time. Vanessa stepped closer. I'm sorry. Claire got hurt. Nathaniel looked up. She didn't get hurt. Vanessa froze. I hurt her. The admission surprised even him. He removed the apartment key Vanessa had given him months earlier and placed it on the counter. Her face changed. Nate, this is over. Don't do this because you feel guilty. I'm doing it because I finally understand what this is. Vanessa's voice broke. You said you loved me. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, whatever I thought I felt, I used it to become someone I don't respect. He walked toward the door. Vanessa called after him. She may never take you back. Nathaniel stopped. He did not turn around. I know. That was the first moment his apology became real. Not because Claire would forgive him, because she might not. Back at Callahan Atlantic, Nathaniel entered his office alone. He picked up his iPhone. Claire's voicemail was still saved. He pressed play. I just wanted to hear your voice. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Then Daniel knocked once and entered. I found something. Nathaniel looked up. Daniel held an envelope. I know where Claire is. Nathaniel stood so fast the chair moved behind him. Where? Daniel did not answer. Instead, he placed the envelope on the desk. She asked that you not be given the address. Nathaniel stared at him. Daniel's voice softened, but she agreed to receive 1 letter. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel had found the woman he wanted and still had no right to go to her. Nathaniel stared at the envelope on his desk. For most of his adult life, if he wanted access to something, he got it. A private dining room with no reservation. A last-minute meeting with a bank chairman. A seat at a sold-out charity gala. An executive who suddenly discovered room in his schedule. Nathaniel Callahan was accustomed to doors opening. This one did not. Daniel Mercer stood across from him. She agreed to receive 1 letter, Daniel repeated. Nathaniel looked at him. You know where she is. Yes. And you won't tell me. No. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Daniel did not move. I'm still your employer. You are. So give me the address. Daniel's expression remained calm. Claire asked me not to. Nathaniel stood. For 1 second, the old instinct returned. Control. Pressure. Authority. Then he saw Claire's wedding ring beside his Mont Blanc pen. He slowly sat back down. How did you even reach her? Daniel hesitated. She contacted the employee healthcare office this morning. Nathaniel looked up. Why? She was transferring several cases she had been managing. Nathaniel frowned. What cases? Daniel almost smiled. You really don't know. The words embarrassed Nathaniel more than he expected. Daniel opened his iPad. Do you remember Robert Hayes? Nathaniel thought for a moment. Warehouse supervisor. Queens facility. His wife had breast cancer 2 years ago. Nathaniel nodded vaguely. Insurance covered most of it. No. Nathaniel looked at him. Daniel continued. The first treatment center denied part of the coverage. Claire spent 6 weeks helping Mrs. Hayes appeal. Nathaniel said nothing. She found a hospital financial counselor. She called the insurer. She helped them apply for assistance. Nathaniel leaned back. Daniel swiped the screen. Marcus Reed, one of your drivers. I know Marcus. His daughter wanted to attend nursing school. Nathaniel nodded. We gave her a scholarship. Claire created the scholarship. Nathaniel's face changed. Daniel continued. She found unused money in the foundation education budget and convinced Margaret to approve it. Another name. Linda Foster. Housekeeping. Nathaniel remembered her. Her husband died. Claire helped her deal with the hospital bills and Social Security paperwork. Daniel put the iPad down. There are dozens more. Nathaniel stared at him. Why didn't anyone tell me? Daniel answered quietly. Because Claire never wanted credit. Nathaniel looked toward the Manhattan skyline. For years, he had believed people remained loyal because of his name. Because Callahan Atlantic paid well. Because his family was powerful. Because leaving the organization could be difficult. Now another possibility formed. Some people had trusted the Callahans because Claire gave them a reason to. Daniel leaned forward. My wife had cancer 4 years ago. Nathaniel turned. He had never known. Daniel continued. I was still new here. I didn't want anyone thinking I couldn't handle the job. What happened? Claire noticed I was missing lunches. Nathaniel listened. She figured it out without asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. She sent my wife a list of oncologists and drove her to one appointment when I was stuck in court. Daniel's voice changed slightly. She sat with her through chemotherapy once. Nathaniel swallowed. She never told me. No. Why? Because it wasn't about you. That sentence stayed in the room. Nathaniel looked down. Claire had built an entire world beside him. He had been too busy believing he was the center of it to notice. Daniel pushed the envelope closer. She agreed to receive one letter. Nathaniel touched it. What am I supposed to write? Daniel shook his head. That part is yours. When Daniel left, Nathaniel remained alone. He picked up his Mont Blanc pen. For nearly 15 minutes, the page stayed blank. Then he wrote, Claire, I'm sorry. He stared at the words. They looked pathetic. Too easy. He crossed them out. He started again. I saw your name on my phone. He stopped. Then continued. 3 times. 3 times you called me. 3 times I decided there would be another chance to answer. Nathaniel put the pen down. His hands were shaking. He forced himself to continue. Vanessa lied to me about part of the threat. But that is not why I failed you. I failed you because I wanted to believe you would always be there. I treated your strength like permission to neglect you. I told myself you were safe because you were in a hospital. The truth is that I did not want to leave where I was. I made that choice. You did not deserve it. He stopped again. He almost wrote, Please come home. He didn't. Instead, I do not know whether I deserve another conversation with you. I will not ask you to forgive me. I will not ask you to come back. I only need you to know that I understand one thing now. You did not leave because I missed a call. You left because I taught you that when you needed me most, you could not trust me to answer. Nathaniel signed his name. No title, no company, just Nate. The next morning, a courier delivered the envelope to a quiet rehabilitation center outside Manhattan. Laura Bennett brought it into Claire's room. Claire recognized the handwriting immediately. Her fingers froze. You don't have to read it, Laura said. Claire looked at the envelope for a long time, then opened it. She read every word. Once. Then again. By the final paragraph, tears were running silently down her face. Laura moved closer. Claire shook her head. I'm okay. She folded the letter carefully. Laura waited. Are you going to call him? Claire looked toward the window. No. She placed the letter inside the bedside drawer. Not beside her wedding ring. That ring was still with Nathaniel. Laura sat beside her. After a long silence, Claire said, I'm going home. Laura's eyes widened. To Nathaniel? Claire looked at her sister. For the first time since surgery, something steady appeared in her expression. No. She turned toward the winter landscape outside. Pennsylvania. Nathaniel had finally written the right apology. But he was about to learn that saying the right words did not mean Claire was returning to the life that had broken her. And hundreds of miles away from Park Avenue, Claire was about to build something Nathaniel's money had never been able to give her. A life that belonged entirely to herself. 3 weeks later, Claire Bennett stepped out of Laura's car in the small Pennsylvania town where she had grown up. The air smelled different from Manhattan. Cleaner, colder, quieter. There were no black SUVs waiting at the curb. No doorman opening glass doors. No assistants checking schedules on iPads. Just a 2-story brick house, bare winter trees, and Laura carrying Claire's overnight bag toward the front porch. Claire stood beside the car longer than necessary. Her abdomen still hurt when she moved too quickly. Recovery had been slower than she expected. That frustrated her. She had spent years telling patients to respect their bodies after major surgery. Now she hated needing help to climb 6 steps. Laura noticed. Don't even think about carrying that bag. I can carry 1 bag. You can also reopen something and end up back in a hospital. Claire gave her a tired look. Laura smiled. Good. You're annoyed. That means you're improving. Inside, the house was warm. Family photographs covered the hallway. Claire saw herself at 16 in a high school uniform. At 22, wearing nursing scrubs. At 29, standing beside her mother outside a hospital after one of her first ICU shifts. There were almost no photographs of Nathaniel. That surprised her. For 11 years, Claire had thought of herself primarily as Claire Callahan. Here, the walls remembered Claire Bennett. That night, she slept nearly 10 hours. The next morning, Laura found her sitting at the kitchen table with a Starbucks coffee and an old nursing notebook. What are you doing? Claire looked up, thinking. That sounds dangerous. Claire smiled. She had not smiled much lately. Laura sat across from her. Claire turned the notebook around. On the page were 3 words. Patient Navigation Program. Laura read them. You want to go back to nursing? Eventually. You can barely walk through the grocery store. I said eventually. Claire wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. When I worked ICU, I saw the same problem, over and over. What problem? Women taking care of everyone except themselves. Laura listened. Claire continued. Mothers delaying scans because their children needed them. Wives missing appointments because their husbands were sick. Caregivers getting prescriptions they couldn't afford and being too embarrassed to ask for help. She looked down. I became one of them. Laura's expression softened. Claire swallowed. I knew the warning signs. I knew what surgery could do, and somehow I still spent most of that night worried about Margaret. That's who you are. Claire shook her head. No. That's what I do. The distinction mattered. For years, I thought being useful was the same as being loved. Laura did not answer immediately. Then she reached across the table. What do you want now? Claire looked at the notebook. I want women like me to have someone who notices before they disappear inside everyone else's problems. It began small. Very small. Once Dr. Sloan cleared Claire for limited activity, she volunteered 4 hours a week at a community health center 10 minutes from Laura's house. The building was ordinary. Fluorescent lights. Plastic chairs. An old coffee machine in the break room. Claire loved it. Nobody cared that she had once attended charity dinners at the plaza. Nobody asked about the Callahan name. They asked whether she could explain insurance paperwork, whether she knew where to find affordable transportation to chemotherapy, whether she could help an older woman understand why Medicare had denied a claim. Claire could. One afternoon, she sat with a 63-year-old widow named June who had postponed a heart test for 6 months. Why did you wait? Claire asked gently. June looked embarrassed. My sister has dementia. Claire nodded. And there was always something more important. June's eyes filled. Yes. Claire felt the words in her chest. Always something more important. She took June's hand. Not today. After the appointment, Claire went into the staff bathroom and cried. Not because she was falling apart, because she finally understood what she wanted to build. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's world was becoming quieter. Margaret had returned to her Westchester home but refused to host Sunday family dinners. When Nathaniel visited, she remained polite. Nothing more. At Callahan Atlantic, employees began asking about Claire. At first, Nathaniel gave vague answers. She's recovering. Then one warehouse manager asked directly, Is she coming back? Nathaniel looked at the man. He could have lied. Instead, he said, I don't know. The manager hesitated. Mrs. Callahan helped my wife when our insurance company denied her surgery. Nathaniel felt the now familiar shame. I didn't know. The man looked surprised. Nathaniel was starting to understand how often he had to say those words. I didn't know. One evening, Margaret asked him to drive her to a follow-up appointment. Nathaniel arrived 12 minutes late. Margaret was waiting by the door. She looked at his watch. Nate, I'm sorry. A meeting ran long. Margaret stared at him. Then she said quietly, Claire never made me wait. Nathaniel had no answer. He drove the rest of the way in silence. Back in Pennsylvania, Claire received an email on her MacBook Air. A regional healthcare foundation had reviewed the proposal she submitted for a caregiver patient navigation pilot. They wanted a meeting. Laura found Claire staring at the screen. What happened? Claire turned the laptop around. Laura read the message. Her eyes widened. Oh my God. Claire covered her mouth. For the first time since leaving Manhattan, she cried from something other than grief. Hope. Laura hugged her carefully. Claire laughed through tears. It's only a meeting. No. Laura held her tighter. It's a beginning. That night, Claire placed Nathaniel's letter beside her bed. She read it once more. Then she folded it and put it away. She still loved him. That truth had not changed. But for the first time in 11 years, loving Nathaniel was no longer the center of her life. And while Claire was building something new from the pieces of herself she had recovered, Nathaniel was about to discover how much of his empire had quietly depended on the woman he thought would always stay. Nathaniel first understood the problem during a Monday morning board meeting. Callahan Atlantic Holdings occupied 3 floors of a glass tower on Park Avenue. The conference room overlooked Manhattan, with a stock ticker running silently across one wall and 12 executives seated around a polished walnut table. Nathaniel had spent years feeling strongest in rooms like this. That morning, he felt exposed. His chief financial officer pushed an iPad toward him. We have another delay. Nathaniel frowned. With what? The Employee Healthcare Partnership. We renewed that every year. Claire handled most of the relationship. Nathaniel looked up. The room became uncomfortable. He hated how often her name appeared now. What exactly is missing? The CFO opened several documents. 2 hospital agreements need updated compliance paperwork. The Transportation Assistance Program has unpaid invoices. 3 employee families were referred to specialists, but nobody followed up. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Why wasn't this handled by the foundation? A woman from Human Resources answered carefully. Because Mrs. Callahan was handling it. Nathaniel looked at her. Personally? Yes. Another executive spoke. She knew the hospital administrators. She knew the case managers. She knew which insurance appeals needed escalation. Nathaniel leaned back. He had imagined Claire attending charity lunches and signing checks. He had never understood she had built the relationships holding the entire program together. How much is this going to cost us? The CFO hesitated. That isn't really the biggest problem. What is? Trust. Nathaniel said nothing. The executive continued. Several employee representatives are asking whether the healthcare program is being reduced. It isn't. They don't know that. Then tell them. We did. A long silence followed. Nathaniel understood before anyone explained. They did not believe a memo. They had believed Claire. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel walked through the employee benefits department for the first time in years. People stood straighter when they saw him. He recognized almost nobody. That bothered him. On one desk sat a framed photograph of Claire beside 3 nurses at a charity health fair. Another held a thank you card. Mrs. Callahan, thank you for helping my husband get treatment before it was too late. Nathaniel stopped reading. His assistant approached quietly. Your mother called. I'll call her later. She said it was important. Nathaniel almost repeated his usual answer. Then he caught himself. Put her through. Margaret's voice came over the phone. There's a family dinner Thursday. At your house? Yes. Nathaniel was surprised. Margaret had canceled every family gathering since the hospital. Why now? Because something needs to be said. Thursday night, the Callahan estate in Westchester felt colder than usual. A long dining table had been set for 16 people. Andrew was there. 2 uncles. Several cousins. Margaret sat at the head of the table, thinner than before but stronger. Nathaniel arrived early. That alone made Andrew notice. Dinner remained polite until Nathaniel's uncle Richard mentioned Claire. I still don't understand why everyone is treating her like a saint. Margaret slowly put down her fork. Richard continued. She married into this family. She had a beautiful home, financial security, everything she could want. Nathaniel's expression hardened. Stop. Richard ignored him. She leaves after one bad night and now everyone acts like Nathaniel committed murder. Margaret spoke. One bad night? The table fell silent. Richard looked toward her. Margaret touched the side of her abdomen. Do you know why I'm alive? Nobody answered. Richard frowned. The transplant. Yes. Margaret looked around the table. And whose liver do you think is inside me? Several faces changed. Andrew looked down. He already knew. Richard did not. Margaret said, Claire's. Silence. The word seemed to move around the table. One cousin whispered, What? Margaret's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. Claire volunteered when the rest of you could not donate. Richard stared at Nathaniel. Margaret continued. She went through months of testing. She accepted the surgical risk, and after she was cut open, after part of her liver was placed inside me, she developed internal bleeding. Nobody moved. Nathaniel could feel every eye turn toward him. Margaret looked at her son. She called her husband 3 times. Richard's face changed. Nathaniel did not defend himself. Not anymore. I didn't answer. The admission landed heavily. One cousin looked away. Another lowered his head. Nathaniel continued. I was with Vanessa. Nobody asked who Vanessa was. They already knew. Richard said quietly. I didn't realize. Margaret looked directly at him. That is the problem with this family. Her voice sharpened. You enjoyed everything Claire did because she never demanded applause. She pointed toward the table. She remembered your children's birthdays. She sat beside your wives in hospitals. She helped your employees with insurance. She kept this family human while the rest of you congratulated yourselves for being powerful. Nobody answered. Then Margaret said, Do not ever say again that this family gave Claire everything. She pressed her palm over her healing incision. She gave us more. Nathaniel looked around the room. For years, men at that table had respected him. Tonight, what he saw was different. Disappointment. And he deserved it. The next morning brought another problem. The Callahan Family Foundation's independent accountant requested an urgent meeting. Nathaniel arrived at his office at 8. The accountant placed a folder on the desk. These are expense approvals from the last 6 months. Nathaniel opened it. Luxury hotel charges, private transportation, designer purchases listed as donor gifts, high-end restaurant bills, all connected to Vanessa's projects. Nathaniel's face hardened. How much? Enough that the board needs to investigate. Nathaniel stared at the numbers. Vanessa had not only manipulated him personally, she had used access to his organization. He closed the folder. Freeze her remaining authority. The accountant nodded. And the press? Nathaniel looked toward the skyline. For the first time, he did not care about appearances. Document everything. Hundreds of miles away, Claire sat at a second-hand desk inside a small Pennsylvania office. Her MacBook Air was open. A Starbucks coffee had gone cold beside it. On the wall was a printed sign, Caregiver Health Navigation Pilot. Laura stood in the doorway holding an envelope. You got it. Claire looked up. Got what? Laura smiled. The grant. Claire stood too quickly and immediately grabbed the desk because her body was still healing. Laura laughed and rushed forward. Slow down. Claire covered her mouth. How much? Enough to fund the first year. Claire began crying. She had spent 11 years standing beside an empire that belonged to someone else. Now she had a small office, a modest grant, and a program with her own name on the application. And somehow, it felt bigger. Back in Manhattan, Nathaniel sat alone after the foundation board meeting. Claire's wedding ring rested in his desk drawer. His assistant entered. There's something else. Nathaniel looked up. What? The healthcare employees are requesting that the new patient navigation program be named after Claire. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Even after she left, the people around him were still choosing her. And for the first time, Nathaniel began to understand that Claire had never needed to own his empire to become the most valuable person inside it. The second letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Claire had just finished helping a 68-year-old caregiver appeal a denied physical therapy claim when Laura walked into the small office holding a cream-colored envelope. Claire recognized the handwriting immediately. Nathaniel. Her chest tightened. She had not heard his voice in nearly 4 months. He had not appeared at her office. He had not sent flowers. He had not sent jewelry. He had not used Daniel Mercer to pressure her. He had respected the silence she asked for. That mattered more than Claire wanted to admit. Laura placed the envelope on the desk. You don't have to open it. Claire looked at it for several seconds. I know. Then she opened it. The first line stopped her. Claire, I am not writing to ask you to come home. She read on. I have spent most of my life believing apologies were supposed to make pain disappear. I know now that they do not. Nathaniel did not write about Vanessa first. He wrote about himself. He wrote about the prenatal appointments he had once missed years earlier before they lost a pregnancy. He wrote about anniversaries he had postponed because of meetings. He wrote about Margaret's hospital visits Claire had attended alone. He wrote about the nights Claire waited while he told himself she understood. Then he wrote, I used your patience as evidence that I was doing nothing wrong. Claire stopped reading. Her eyes filled. She pressed the paper flat against the desk and continued. I told myself you were strong. What I meant was that I expected you to survive whatever I refused to give you. Claire covered her mouth. The office disappeared around her. She saw the empty hospital chair again. The wedding ring sliding from her swollen hand. The voicemail greeting. That terrible moment before the procedure when she realized Nathaniel might never answer. She kept reading. I thought Vanessa made me feel needed. You made me feel accountable. I was weak enough to choose the place where I felt powerful. That was not love. That was selfishness. Claire's tears fell onto the paper. Nathaniel continued. I miss you. But missing you does not mean I deserve you. I love you. But loving you does not erase what I did. I am learning that those are different things. He ended with one sentence. I hope the life you are building gives you everything I failed to protect. No request. No pressure. No promise that he had become a different man overnight. Just responsibility. Claire folded the letter. Laura sat across from her. You okay? Claire laughed softly through tears. No. Laura waited. Claire looked toward the rain running down the window. I still love him. It was the first time she had said the words aloud since leaving Manhattan. Laura did not look surprised. That doesn't mean you have to go back. I know. Claire wiped her face. That's what makes it harder. Laura reached across the desk. Love isn't the question anymore. Claire looked at her. What is? Whether you feel safe giving him your heart again? Claire looked down at Nathaniel's letter. She did not have an answer. Meanwhile, Nathaniel sat in an office on East 72nd Street, staring at a therapist he did not particularly like. Dr. Martin Reeves was 61 and completely unimpressed by the Callahan name. Nathaniel had initially agreed to therapy because Margaret asked him. By the 5th session, he understood why she had insisted. Martin leaned back. "You keep describing Vanessa as someone who needed you." "She did." "Did Claire?" Nathaniel hesitated. "Not in the same way." What did Claire expect? Nathaniel looked toward the floor. "Partnership. And how did that make you feel?" Nathaniel frowned. "Responsible." Martin nodded. "Vanessa made you feel powerful. Claire made you responsible." The distinction felt brutal. Nathaniel said nothing. Martin continued, "One is easier for an insecure man." Nathaniel looked up sharply. "I'm not insecure." Martin almost smiled. "Powerful men usually hate that word." Nathaniel leaned back. For once, he did not argue. That afternoon, he drove to Westchester to take Margaret to a transplant follow-up appointment. He arrived 20 minutes early. Margaret noticed. She said nothing, but on the drive home, she looked at him and asked, "How was therapy?" Nathaniel gripped the steering wheel. "Unpleasant." Margaret smiled. "Good." A week later, Margaret traveled to Pennsylvania with Laura's help. Claire was waiting inside the caregiver center when the door opened. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Margaret looked healthier, still thinner, still healing, but alive. Because of Claire, Claire crossed the room first. They embraced carefully. Margaret began crying almost immediately. Claire did too. "I missed you," Margaret whispered. "I missed you too." Margaret looked around the modest office. The second-hand furniture, the printed schedules, the stack of insurance forms. "You built this?" "With help." Margaret smiled. "Of course you did." Later, Claire reached for a folder on a high shelf. Her blouse lifted slightly. Margaret saw the edge of the surgical scar. She froze. Claire noticed. Neither woman spoke for a moment. Margaret touched her own abdomen beneath her sweater. 2 scars. 1 operation. 1 life saved by another. Margaret's eyes filled again. "How do I ever repay you?" Claire took her hand. "You don't." Margaret shook her head. "Claire, live." Margaret cried openly then. Claire held her. After several minutes, Margaret said quietly, "Nathaniel hasn't asked me to bring you back." Claire looked at her. "He hasn't?" "No." "He hasn't asked what to say?" "No." Margaret smiled sadly. "He finally understands that if you ever come back, it has to be your decision." Claire looked toward the window. Something shifted inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but respect. A small amount. Enough to surprise her. That evening, after Margaret left, Claire opened Nathaniel's second letter again. This time she did not cry. She simply read the last sentence slowly, then folded it and placed it beside the first. For months, Nathaniel had been trying to become a man Claire might trust again. What neither of them knew was that Vanessa Whitmore was about to make one final move, and this time, she would drag their private betrayal into public view. And when the scandal broke, Nathaniel would have to choose between protecting the Callahan name and protecting the woman whose name he had already damaged enough. The scandal broke at 7:14 on a Thursday morning. Claire was standing in the small kitchen of her Pennsylvania apartment, waiting for coffee, when Laura walked in holding her iPhone. "You need to see this." Claire looked up. Laura's expression was enough. "What happened?" She turned the screen around. A celebrity business site had published a story overnight. Callahan marriage collapse after secret hospital drama. Claire felt her stomach tighten. She took the phone. The article claimed she had abruptly abandoned Nathaniel after surgery. It described her as emotionally unstable. It suggested she had used Margaret Callahan's transplant crisis to pressure Nathaniel. Then came the worst part. An unnamed source claimed Claire had become increasingly possessive and unpredictable after learning Nathaniel had a close friendship with Vanessa Whitmore. Claire stopped reading. Laura took the phone back. "This is her." Claire said nothing. She leaked this. Claire walked toward the window. Outside, the town was waking quietly. Cars moved through wet streets. A delivery truck stopped beside the pharmacy. Everything looked normal. Inside Claire, the old humiliation returned. Not the pain of the affair, something different. The feeling of being turned into a story by people who did not know what happened. Laura stepped closer. "Do you want me to call a lawyer?" Claire shook her head. "I don't want a war." "She's making you look crazy." "I know." Claire's voice remained calm, but her hands were trembling. Back in Manhattan, Nathaniel was reading the same article on an iPad inside his Park Avenue office. Daniel Mercer stood across from him. So? Nathaniel's face was expressionless. Get legal in here. Within 20 minutes, the room filled. General counsel, public relations, foundation counsel, 2 senior executives. Everyone had an opinion. The PR director spoke first. Our safest position is silence. Nathaniel looked at her. Why? Because responding confirms there is a story. There is a story. Yes, but not one we need to validate. Another executive nodded. We can call it a private family matter. Nathaniel stared at the article again. A sentence near the bottom described Claire as someone who had disappeared during a period of marital strain, as if she had simply packed a suitcase after an argument, as if she had not been bleeding in a hospital while he sat beside Vanessa. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The general counsel leaned forward. If you acknowledge an affair, it could affect the foundation investigation. I had an affair. The room went silent. The lawyer continued carefully. We know. The question is whether the public needs to know. Nathaniel looked toward the Manhattan skyline. A year earlier, this decision would have been simple. Protect the company. Protect the family name. Protect the reputation. Protect himself. Claire would have been expected to absorb whatever remained. Not this time. He turned back. Prepare a statement. The PR director hesitated. What kind? The truth. The room changed immediately. Nate, that is not advisable. I didn't ask what was advisable. The general counsel raised a hand. If you name Vanessa, you could create additional liability. Nathaniel shook his head. I'm not blaming Vanessa. Everyone looked at him. She lied to me about part of the threat. But she did not decline Claire's calls. Nathaniel looked down at his own hands. I did. No one spoke. He continued. The statement says I was unfaithful. It says Claire called me during a serious post-operative medical emergency. It says I failed to answer because I chose to remain somewhere else. The PR director looked stunned. That will be everywhere. It already is. Yes, but this would confirm it. Nathaniel met her eyes. Then confirm it. By noon, the statement went public. It was short. No dramatic language. No attack on Vanessa. Nathaniel accepted responsibility. He confirmed that Claire had undergone major surgery connected to Margaret's transplant. He acknowledged that Claire contacted him repeatedly when complications developed. He admitted he failed to support her. He ended with one request. My wife did not abandon a marriage without cause. She left after I failed her during one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. Any criticism should be directed at me, not at her. The reaction was immediate. Financial media picked it up. Lifestyle sites repeated it. Commentators argued about it. Several business partners requested calls. One charity temporarily asked Nathaniel to step away from its advisory board pending review. A major donor postponed a foundation commitment. Nathaniel accepted every consequence. At 1:32 p.m., Vanessa called him. He watched her name ring, then answered. Her voice was furious. You humiliated me. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. I didn't mention your name. Everyone knows. You released the story. I corrected the story. No. You made yourself look noble. Nathaniel's expression hardened. There is nothing noble about what I admitted. Vanessa went quiet. Then her voice became colder. You're destroying your reputation for a woman who left you. Nathaniel looked at Claire's wedding ring inside the open desk drawer. No. He closed the drawer. I'm telling the truth about the woman I betrayed. Vanessa laughed bitterly. She's never coming back. Nathaniel paused. Maybe not. That answer unsettled Vanessa more than anger would have. Before she could respond, Nathaniel ended the call. Later that afternoon, Claire received dozens of messages. Former nurses, employees, families she had helped. Most said the same thing. We believe you. Claire sat at her desk, reading them slowly. Then she opened Nathaniel's statement. She read every line, twice. Laura watched from the doorway. What do you think? Claire leaned back. He could have protected himself, but he didn't. No. For the first time, Nathaniel had allowed the Callahan name to take the damage instead of using Claire to absorb it. That mattered. Still, Claire did not call him. Accountability was not reconciliation. In Manhattan, the independent audit of the Callahan Family Foundation continued. 2 days later, the board discovered Vanessa had charged thousands of dollars in personal expenses to foundation accounts. Luxury hotel stays, private car services, designer purchases classified as donor gifts. Exclusive restaurant bills unrelated to foundation work. Her contracts were terminated immediately. Several clients withdrew from future projects. A luxury brand quietly canceled an upcoming consulting arrangement. Vanessa threatened legal action. The documentation was clear. For the first time, the doors she had entered through Nathaniel's influence began closing. No police dragged her away. No dramatic arrest occurred. Something more realistic happened. People stopped trusting her. And in Vanessa's world, trust was currency. Weeks later, Claire received an elegant envelope at her office. Callahan Atlantic Employee Health Benefit Dinner. She almost placed it in the trash. Then she saw the second page. Her patient navigation program was being honored. Laura looked over her shoulder. "You're not seriously thinking about going." Claire stared at the invitation. 9 months had passed since room 814. 9 months since she had seen Nathaniel. Her pulse increased. Then she took a slow breath. "I think I am." Laura looked surprised. "Why?" Claire closed the envelope. "Because I'm tired of Manhattan feeling like a place I had to run from." She looked toward the window. "If I'm really rebuilding my life, I need to know I can walk back into that room without becoming the woman I was before." And when Claire walked into that Manhattan ballroom again, Nathaniel would finally meet the woman who survived him and realize forgiveness might be harder to bear than hatred. 9 months after Claire left room 814, she returned to Manhattan. Not for Nathaniel. That distinction mattered. She sat in the back seat of Laura's car as they moved through evening traffic toward the Plaza Hotel, watching familiar streets slide past the window. Fifth Avenue. Luxury storefronts. Black Mercedes sedans. People in tailored coats hurrying beneath warm lights. For years, this city had been the stage for the life Claire built around the Callahan name. Tonight, she was returning with something that belonged only to her. The Caregiver Health Navigation pilot had served more than 200 families during its first year. It was still small, still fragile, still dependent on grants, partnerships, and long hours. But it was real. And tonight, Callahan Atlantic was recognizing the program as part of its annual employee healthcare benefit dinner. Laura glanced over. "You okay?" Claire looked down at her hands. "No." Laura smiled. "Good answer." Claire laughed softly. She wore a dark blue Dior dress she had owned for years. No dramatic makeover. No new diamonds. No attempt to look younger, richer, or more powerful. Her hair was pinned simply. Her makeup was light. A faint surgical scar remained beneath the fabric of her dress. Claire no longer felt ashamed of it. That scar had become proof of two things: what she had given, and what she had survived. The car stopped. A doorman opened the door. Claire stepped onto the sidewalk. For 1 second, fear returned. Not fear of Nathaniel, fear of becoming the old Claire again. The woman who entered a room and immediately checked whether her husband needed something. The woman who measured the evening by his mood. The woman who apologized for taking up space. Laura touched her arm. "You don't owe anyone anything tonight." Claire nodded. "I know." Then she walked inside. The ballroom was filled with more than 300 guests. Healthcare executives, Wall Street donors, hospital administrators, Callahan Atlantic employees. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished glass. Waiters moved through the room carrying champagne. Beyond the tall windows, the Manhattan skyline shimmered in the winter darkness. Claire had seen scenes like this hundreds of times, but she felt different inside them now. People noticed her almost immediately. A woman from the foundation approached first. "Claire." The warmth in her voice was genuine. "We're so glad you came." Claire smiled. "Thank you for inviting me." Then another employee came over. Then another. A warehouse supervisor hugged her. A driver introduced Claire to his wife. A nurse from one of the partner hospitals told Claire that her new patient navigation system was already being studied for expansion. Claire realized something slowly. Nobody was approaching her because she was Nathaniel Callahan's wife. They were approaching her because of what she had done. That realization settled somewhere, deep inside her. Across the ballroom, Nathaniel saw her. He had been speaking with 2 board members when his attention stopped completely. Claire stood near the entrance. For a moment, everything else disappeared. He had imagined this moment hundreds of times. Sometimes she looked angry, sometimes cold, sometimes tearful. In none of those imagined scenes had he understood what would hurt most. She looked peaceful, not perfectly healed, not untouched, peaceful. Nathaniel's first instinct was to walk toward her. He stopped himself. That was the old habit, wanting access simply because he wanted it. So he stayed where he was. Claire noticed him several minutes later. Their eyes met across the room. Nathaniel did not smile. He only gave a small nod. Claire returned it. Nothing more. Then Margaret appeared. She had recovered remarkably well, still thinner than before surgery, but stronger. The moment she saw Claire, she crossed the ballroom without hesitation. Claire smiled. Margaret wrapped both arms around her. You came. I said I would. Margaret pulled back. You look beautiful. Claire laughed softly. So do you. Margaret touched Claire's cheek. I look alive. The words hit both of them. Claire's eyes filled. So you do. A few nearby guests looked away politely. Later, dinner began. Claire sat with Laura and several healthcare administrators. Nathaniel was seated across the ballroom with the board. He never once tried to change the seating arrangement. When the presentation began, the host spoke about Callahan Atlantic's employee healthcare initiatives. Then Claire's name appeared on the screen. She froze. The host continued. 9 months ago, Claire Bennett Callahan began developing a caregiver navigation model based on a simple idea. The people who spend their lives caring for others deserve someone to care about them too. Applause began. Claire looked down. Laura squeezed her hand. The host described the families helped. Cancer patients, caregivers, older spouses, workers navigating insurance problems. Then, we are proud to announce a new partnership that will expand Claire's program into New York. The applause grew louder. Claire stood. Her eyes moved instinctively across the ballroom. Nathaniel was standing too. He was applauding, but he remained at the back. He did not claim her success. He did not approach the stage. He did not turn the moment into a story about their marriage. That mattered. Claire walked to the podium. For several seconds, she looked at the room. Then she said, I spent many years thinking strength meant being the person who never needed anything. The room became still. I was wrong. Claire took a breath. Strength is knowing when to ask for help. And sometimes, strength is understanding that loving other people should not require abandoning yourself. Nathaniel lowered his eyes. Claire continued. This program exists because too many people, especially women, become invisible while caring for everyone around them. Her voice softened. I know what that feels like. When she finished, the room stood. Claire stepped away from the podium with tears in her eyes. She had expected seeing Nathaniel again to be the hardest part of the night. It was not. The hardest part was realizing she no longer needed him to see her value. After dinner, Claire found him standing alone near the windows. This time, she approached. Nathaniel turned. For several seconds, neither spoke. He finally said, You look well. Claire gave a small smile. I'm getting there. How's your health? Good. Rebecca says everything is stable. Relief crossed his face. And Margaret? Claire glanced toward the older woman laughing with Laura. She looks stronger every month. Nathaniel nodded. Another silence. Then he said, I listened to your voicemail every day for 3 months. Claire's eyes filled. She looked away. Nate, I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty. I know. I just need you to know I heard it eventually. Claire looked back at him. Then she said quietly, I stopped waiting for you to answer. Nathaniel's face tightened. I know. There was no defense. No excuse. Only acceptance. Claire studied him. He looked older. Not physically much different, but quieter, less certain that every room belonged to him. She took a breath. Do you want to know why I really left the hospital? Nathaniel frowned. I thought I knew. Claire shook her head. No. For the first time that night, Nathaniel looked afraid. Claire glanced toward the ballroom doors. Then back at the man she had once trusted with everything. There was something I saw that morning. Nathaniel went still. What? Claire's eyes met his. And suddenly room 814 was not finished with either of them. Because Nathaniel was about to learn that Claire had almost forgiven him that morning until one final image showed her exactly where he had spent the night. For several seconds, Nathaniel did not move. The ballroom noise faded behind them. Claire stood beside the tall windows of the Plaza Hotel, Manhattan glowing beyond the glass, while the man she had loved for 11 years waited for the truth he had never heard. What did you see? Nathaniel asked. Claire looked down at her hands. The morning I left. He said nothing. Claire took a slow breath. When I woke up after the second procedure, I was angry. Nathaniel's face tightened. But I was also relieved. She gave a sad smile. I was alive. Margaret was alive. The bleeding had stopped. Nathaniel lowered his eyes. Claire continued. I remember thinking maybe you had panicked. Maybe you didn't understand how serious it was. Maybe Vanessa really was in danger. Nathaniel looked at her. You were making excuses for me. Yes. The answer was immediate. Claire's eyes filled. That was the worst part. Nathaniel frowned slightly. Claire turned toward the window. I had almost died, and I was still trying to protect you from the truth about yourself. He looked away. Claire continued. A nurse brought me my phone. Her voice softened. I had dozens of messages. Laura, Andrew, people from the hospital. Then she paused. And one social media notification. Nathaniel went still. Claire looked back at him. Vanessa had posted a photo shortly before dawn. Nathaniel's face changed. What photo? A champagne glass beside her kitchen window. He said nothing. Claire continued. Your Rolex was on the table. Nathaniel closed his eyes. He remembered exactly where he had placed it. Claire's voice trembled. I stared at that picture for almost a minute. She swallowed. I had spent the entire night telling myself you were trapped in some emergency. Nathaniel's breathing slowed. And then I saw your watch. Claire looked directly at him. You weren't trapped. Nathaniel whispered. No. You stayed. Yes. You had time to pour a drink. His face tightened. Yes. You had time to sit with her. Yes. You had time to ignore me. Nathaniel's eyes filled. Yes. Claire nodded slowly. That was when I asked for the transfer. Nathaniel looked at her. You were going to stay before that? Claire laughed softly through tears. I was going to forgive you. The words hit him harder than anger. I had already started. Nathaniel looked down. Claire continued. I told myself you were under pressure. I told myself your life was complicated. I told myself you loved me in your own way. She wiped one tear away. I had been doing that for years. Nathaniel remained silent. Claire's voice became steadier. That photograph didn't prove you didn't love me. She paused. It proved I had stopped loving myself. Nathaniel looked up. Claire's eyes met his. I wasn't afraid you didn't love me anymore. Her voice broke. I was afraid I had forgotten how to love myself. Nathaniel closed his eyes. For one moment, he looked like he might collapse. Claire continued. I had become a woman who could wake up after major surgery, see that her husband had ignored 3 calls, and still think maybe she should apologize for needing him. Nathaniel opened his eyes again. I did that to you. Claire nodded. Yes. There was no cruelty in her voice. That made it worse. Nathaniel stepped closer, then stopped before entering her space. I am sorry. Claire looked at him. I know. No. He shook his head. I am sorry for more than that night. Claire remained still. I am sorry I made your patience feel like an obligation. His voice cracked. I am sorry I made you feel like asking for me was asking too much. Claire's tears returned. Nathaniel continued. I am sorry I let you become invisible while I enjoyed everything you did for me. He swallowed. And I am sorry that you had to nearly die before I understood any of it. Claire looked down. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said, I forgive you. Nathaniel's eyes lifted immediately. Hope flashed across his face before he could hide it. Claire saw it. She shook her head gently. Forgiveness isn't the same as coming home. The hope disappeared. Nathaniel nodded. I know. Claire studied him. Months earlier, he would have argued. He would have promised. He would have offered anything. Tonight, he simply accepted her answer. That mattered. Nathaniel looked toward the ballroom. So this is it? Claire's chest tightened. I don't know. He turned back. Claire continued. But I know I can't return to the marriage we had. You shouldn't. The answer surprised her. Nathaniel gave a sad smile. That marriage taught you to disappear. Claire's eyes filled again. He reached into his jacket. For 1 second, Claire tensed. Nathaniel noticed. He stopped. Then slowly removed a small velvet box. Claire recognized it. Her wedding ring. Nathaniel held it but did not open the box. I've carried this with me almost every day. Claire stared at it. I kept thinking I should give it back. Nathaniel looked at her. Then I realized that was still me deciding. He placed the box on the table beside them. So, I'm not asking you to wear it. Claire looked at the box. I'm not even asking you to take it. Nathaniel stepped back. It stays here until you decide what it means. Claire's throat tightened. That was different. No pressure. No possession. No command. Just choice. For the first time, Nathaniel was giving her something without deciding what she had to do with it. Claire looked at him. There's one thing I need from you. Nathaniel straightened. Anything. She almost smiled. Take care of Margaret. His expression softened. I will. Not because I asked. I know. Because she's your mother. Nathaniel nodded. I know. Claire picked up her coat. Nathaniel did not stop her. She took several steps, then turned. Nate. He looked at her. I really did love you. His eyes filled. I know. Claire shook her head. No, I mean I still do. Nathaniel froze. Claire continued. But love cannot be the only reason two people stay married. Then she walked away. Nathaniel remained beside the window, surrounded by hundreds of people, and feeling completely alone. He looked down at the velvet box. For the first time, he understood that Claire's forgiveness was not a victory. It was a responsibility, a chance to become better, even if she never returned. And that frightened him more than losing her, because now there was no enemy to defeat, no deal to make, no door to force open, only time, only behavior, only truth. And over the next 6 months, Nathaniel would discover that redemption was not something a powerful man could buy. It was something he had to prove when Claire was no longer watching. 6 months after the night at the plaza, Nathaniel Callahan stopped trying to win Claire back. That was when his life actually began to change. He still missed her. He still kept her old voicemail saved on his iPhone. He still sometimes opened the desk drawer where the velvet ring box had once been. But he no longer treated pain like a problem money could solve. Every Tuesday at 8 in the morning, Nathaniel sat across from Dr. Martin Reeves. Every Thursday, he drove Margaret to her transplant follow-up appointments. Every Sunday, he had dinner with his mother. And for the first time in years, he arrived before she did. Margaret noticed everything. She simply refused to praise him for basic decency. One afternoon, while Nathaniel waited beside her at the hospital pharmacy, Margaret looked at him. You seem irritated. I've been here 40 minutes. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Nathaniel caught himself. Then he laughed. Claire used to do this for you every month. Yes. And she never complained. No. Nathaniel looked around the crowded waiting area. Older couples. A tired mother with a sleeping child. A man sorting prescription bottles into a paper bag. For years, Nathaniel had believed caring for someone meant paying the bill. Claire had understood that sometimes care meant sitting in an uncomfortable chair for 40 minutes and staying. He remained seated. The changes at Callahan Atlantic were quieter, but equally important. After the foundation audit, Nathaniel created independent oversight for all charitable spending. No family member could approve luxury expenses alone. No consultant could receive special treatment because of personal relationships. He also expanded the employee healthcare fund Claire had helped build. When the board suggested naming the new program after him, Nathaniel refused. Call it the Bennett Caregiver Initiative. The room went quiet. One executive smiled. Claire's maiden name? Yes. Does she know? No. Shouldn't we ask her? Nathaniel nodded. Yes. The old Nathaniel would have announced it first. The new one sent a proposal. Claire could accept it, change it, or reject it. She accepted on one condition. No large portrait. No gala speech about her marriage. Just the program. Nathaniel agreed. That was how they began speaking again. Professionally. At first, every conversation was careful. Claire joined meetings from Pennsylvania through her MacBook Air. Nathaniel sat in the Park Avenue boardroom with his iPad open and listened. He did not interrupt her. He did not answer questions directed at her. He did not treat her expertise like an extension of his authority. Months earlier, Claire would have noticed those changes immediately. Now she watched longer. Words were easy. Patterns mattered. The Bennett Caregiver Initiative expanded into New York, serving warehouse families, hospital caregivers, and older spouses navigating complicated insurance systems. Claire traveled to Manhattan twice a month. She and Nathaniel occasionally found themselves alone after meetings. At first, they spoke only about work, then Margaret, then ordinary things. One evening, Nathaniel noticed a paperback sticking out of Claire's bag. Meditations? Claire looked down. Laura gave it to me. Any good? Claire smiled. Some parts. Nathaniel nodded. I started therapy. I know. His eyebrows lifted. Margaret told me. Of course she did. Claire laughed. The sound affected him more than he expected. But he did not reach for it. He had learned that hope became dangerous when treated like entitlement. Then, on a rainy October evening, Claire's car refused to start outside the community health center. Nathaniel had just finished a meeting there. He saw Claire standing beside the hood, with her phone in one hand. Old Nathaniel would have called his driver, arranged a replacement car, and informed Claire what would happen next. Instead, he walked closer. Do you want help? Claire looked at him. The question was so simple that it almost hurt. Do you want help? Not. Give me the keys. Not. I'll handle it. Not. You shouldn't be doing this yourself. Claire studied him for a moment. Yes. Nathaniel nodded. I'll call roadside assistance. They ended up sitting inside the health center lobby while rain hit the windows. The vending machine coffee was terrible. Claire took one sip and made a face. Nathaniel laughed. You used to drink hospital coffee. I was younger then. He looked at her. So was I. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. Claire held the paper cup between both hands. Nathaniel looked toward the dark parking lot. I used to think power meant nobody could leave me. Claire turned toward him. He continued. If someone could leave, I thought I had failed to control something. Claire said nothing. Nathaniel gave a tired smile. I'm beginning to understand how ugly that sounds. Claire looked down at her coffee. Then she said, power is giving people a reason to stay when they're free to go. Nathaniel absorbed the words. That sounds like something Dr. Reeves would charge me $300 to hear. Claire laughed. You can send me the check. For a moment, they were not betrayed wife and guilty husband. They were Claire and Nate. Two people who once ate diner pancakes at 2 in the morning after her hospital shifts. Two people who had loved each other before money, foundations, Vanessa, and disappointment filled the space between them. Nathaniel did not push the moment. When roadside assistance arrived, he walked Claire outside. The mechanic fixed a loose battery connection. Claire opened the driver's door. Nate. He looked at her. Would you like to have dinner sometime? Nathaniel froze. Claire noticed and almost smiled. Dinner. I heard you. Not moving home. I know. Not pretending everything is fixed. I know. Claire studied his face. You can say no. Nathaniel laughed softly. I'm learning, but I'm not insane. Claire smiled. Friday? I'll be there. Friday evening, Nathaniel arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes early. No assistant. No security interruption. No second phone on the table. When Claire entered, he stood. She noticed the empty seat across from him. She noticed his iPhone turned off inside his coat pocket. And she noticed something that once would have seemed too small to matter. He had waited for her. Nathaniel pulled out the chair. Claire sat. Neither knew where the evening would lead. But for the first time, they were not rebuilding the old marriage. They were deciding whether two changed people could create a new one. And 1 year after room 814, Nathaniel would finally place Claire's wedding ring back into her hand, but this time, only Claire would decide whether it belonged there. 1 year after Claire left room 814, the garden behind Margaret Callahan's Westchester home was filled with white roses. Not hundreds of them, just enough. Claire had insisted on that. No ballroom, no press, no donor list, no security line of black SUVs stretching down the driveway, only family, a few close friends, Dr. Rebecca Sloan, Daniel Mercer, Laura Bennett, and several people Claire had helped through the Bennett Caregiver Initiative. The ceremony was small because Claire wanted the day to feel like a promise, not a performance. She stood beneath a simple wooden arch wearing an ivory dress with long sleeves. Nathaniel waited across from her in a dark suit. No Rolex, no entourage, no speech prepared by public relations. Just him. Margaret sat in the front row. Healthy, stronger, alive. When Claire looked at her, Margaret touched one hand to her abdomen. Claire understood. She touched her own scar beneath the fabric of her dress. Two women, two scars, one life carried forward by the other. Nathaniel noticed the exchange. His eyes filled. The officiant spoke briefly. Nothing dramatic, nothing about destiny, nothing about perfect love. Because perfect love was not what had brought Claire and Nathaniel back to this garden. Truth had. Time had. Consequences had. Therapy had. Boundaries had. And thousands of ordinary choices made when nobody was watching. When it was time for Nathaniel to speak, he looked at Claire. I used to think a promise mattered because of the words. Claire held his gaze. I know now, it matters because of what you do after everyone stops listening. The garden became completely still. Nathaniel continued. I cannot promise that I will never disappoint you. Claire's eyes softened. But I can promise I will never again treat your strength as permission to neglect you. Margaret wiped away a tear. Nathaniel took a breath. I will not ask you to disappear inside my life. His voice broke slightly. I will make room for yours. Claire blinked back tears. Then it was her turn. She looked at him for a long moment. I came back because you changed when you had no guarantee I would ever see it. Nathaniel lowered his eyes. Claire continued. You learned to show up when there was nothing to win. He looked back at her. That is the man I choose. The word choose mattered. Nathaniel understood that. So did Claire. When the vows ended, Nathaniel reached into his jacket. He removed a small velvet box. Claire recognized it immediately. Her wedding ring. The ring from room 814. For more than a year, Nathaniel had kept it. But he did not open the box and place the ring on her finger. Instead, he held the box out. This belongs to you. Claire looked down. Nathaniel continued. You decide what it means. Her eyes filled. She opened the box. The gold band looked exactly as she remembered. Small, simple, heavy with 11 years of love, disappointment, waiting, fear, and survival. Claire touched it. For one brief second, she was back in the hospital. White lights, falling blood pressure, an empty chair, a phone that never connected. Then she looked up. The man standing in front of her was not the man who sat in Vanessa's apartment that night, and she was no longer the woman who believed love meant enduring everything quietly. Claire lifted the ring. Then she placed it on her own finger. Applause rose from the small group. Margaret cried openly. Laura laughed through tears. Nathaniel simply stared at Claire. You're sure? Claire smiled. I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't. He leaned forward and kissed her. Not like a victory, like gratitude. Later that evening, long after the ceremony ended, the garden lights glowed beneath the trees. Margaret sat with Laura telling stories about Claire's first years in the family. Daniel was arguing with Andrew about baseball. Rebecca stood near the dessert table with a glass of wine. Claire watched them from across the garden. The life around her felt full, but not because she had returned to the Callahan world, because she had returned on her own terms. The Bennett Caregiver Initiative now operated in Pennsylvania and New York. Claire had her own office, her own salary, her own board, her own schedule. Nathaniel never asked her to give any of it up. Their marriage no longer required Claire to become smaller. That was the difference. Nathaniel stood near a table talking with Margaret when his iPhone rang. He looked down immediately. Then he frowned. Claire Callahan. He looked across the garden. Claire stood 20 feet away, holding her own phone to her ear. She was smiling. Nathaniel answered, Hello? Claire watched him. Just checking. He laughed softly. Checking what? Whether you answer your wife now. Nathaniel's eyes filled. The joke was gentle, but both of them knew what lived underneath it. 3 unanswered calls. 1 hospital room. 1 night that had changed everything. Nathaniel looked at Claire across the garden. Every time. Claire smiled. Good answer. She ended the call. Nathaniel walked toward her. This time, she did not have to wait. He reached her in seconds. Claire slipped her hand into his. The wedding ring caught the garden light, but it no longer represented endurance. It represented choice. Forgiveness had not erased what happened. Nathaniel could never undo those 3 declined calls. Claire could never become the woman who believed there would always be another tomorrow. That woman was gone. And in the end, that was not a tragedy. It was the reason their second chance worked. Vanessa had lost the consulting career and social access she tried to protect through manipulation. Nathaniel had lost the illusion that power excused neglect. Margaret had regained her health. Claire had regained herself. And the marriage survived only because the old version of it did not. Claire looked toward Margaret, laughing beneath the lights. Then at Nathaniel. For years she had believed love was measured by how much a woman could give. Now she knew better. Real love was not asking someone to bleed quietly while you promised to notice tomorrow. Real love was showing up today. And when the person you love calls because they need you, there is one lesson Nathaniel Callahan would never forget again. Never assume there will be another morning to answer. So, Claire and Nathaniel's story has finally reached its quiet place. And if you're still here with me, I'm glad you stayed. Because this was never only about an unanswered hospital call. It was about betrayal, being misunderstood, and the kind of pain that makes you want to explain yourself to someone who has already chosen not to listen. Claire didn't beg. She didn't chase. She walked away because staying would have cost her something more important than the marriage. Her dignity. That may be the hardest lesson here. You cannot control who disappoints you, who misunderstands you, or who chooses someone else. But you can still control what you do next. You can protect your peace. You can stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. And yes, you can choose yourself again without becoming cold. Claire didn't win because Nathaniel suffered. She won because she stopped abandoning herself.